all of it works here. Coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1173 entitled A Generation of Warriors. So I have been waiting for what happens in this chapter for about a decade. And I am pleased to say that we finally have a little bit of headway into finding out more about Brook's past, of which we were alluded to a lot in Thriller Bark. There's a lot to Brook, and I think in a video or two, I was a bit on the case. I'm not too sure, but let's continue. So we find out what Zoro's plan is, kinda, I guess, because as Jarl and the possessed giants are going after one another, Zoro jumps off of Hydrodon, jumps into the air, and slashes several demon-possessed giants. So in doing so, I guess the plan of which was discussed in the previous chapter, which looking at now, I guess the plan was just to attack the giants from the air and cut them up, which Zoro does. But in doing so, he actually makes Brocky and Dory attack one another, which is something that a lot of people around the internet were talking about that would actually happen, and people thought that was Zoro's plan. But that was just a miscalculation, which led to a very cool reference of what Brogy and Dory were doing back on Little Garden. So this most likely will keep them preoccupied for the rest of the arc, because their rivalry burns brighter than any demon possession. That would be a pretty base conclusion. We then cut to Brook, who's inchworming his way across a giant tree branch. So it's very funny that he got away from the group by just inchworming along. He calls out to Gunko and calls her Princess Shuri. However, we'll have to see if it's Sherry or Shuri in the official translation, but he's trying to make sense of what he's seeing, whether this person in front of him is the actual Princess Shuri or a descendant, because the real Princess Shuri would be around 80 years old at this point. So we now know Gunko is at least 10 years younger than Brook, which is very interesting. But in addition to that, he also says that the blue hair and the heterochromia are markers of the kingdom that she comes from, in addition to a connection to the Holy Land. We know from the Elbaf flashback, right, that Gunko is of the Man-Mayer family. This is interesting because the only other known member of the Man-Mayer family who doesn't have a name yet is the weird girl with the hat who always has her tongue out. Or at least I think she's a woman, I'm not sure. But she too has blue hair, and we never see her eyes. So now we know why her eyes are always obscured by her hat. It's because she most likely has heterochromia like Gunko. Now, with that being said, the blue hair thing is weird because now we know two D families have members with blue hair. Zebek, being a part of the Davy clan, has blue hair, and of course Nefertiri the Lily has blue hair. So it's weird to now think about where exactly Gunko being a Man-Mayer places in the world. I do think this is maybe a reverse Don Quixote Doflamingo situation, and the Man-Mayer family was already established, but Gunko or Shuri's part of the family was off in another land, of which Brook occupied as the leader of a battle convoy, and then over time they just got reabsorbed back into the Holy Land, perhaps. And we also know that oddly, Gunko has the ability to form her arrow cloth into a fencing weapon, which is very peculiar because I've often thought wherever Brook is from, fencing as a sword style has to be a big part of the culture, because that was a big thing in Thriller Bark. Brook went on about it. There's a whole bunch of details about how he was the best at this particular technique, and they renamed the technique after him and all that. So this has been at least over a decade in the waiting for us to see when the other shoe is going to drop on all this Brook lore, and I've been patiently waiting for it. I'm super excited to see where this goes. But it's also being implied that Gunko killed her father, which is very interesting because now she's drawing a very interesting parallel to Loki himself. But based on how close Gunko has been to Emu, I don't think this is going to be a complex situation like what we see with Loki and Harold. I think it's going to be more along the lines of Don Quixote do Flamingo and Don Quixote homing. Maybe the Man-Mayer family once tried to separate themselves from the Holy Land and Marijois in general because the father in question, of whom Brook sees as a benefactor, tried to reclaim his family name as something of merit and not associated with a bunch of slave owners. But then Gunko perhaps didn't see it that way, and maybe due to other environmental circumstances, she just killed her father and maybe brought his head back to the Holy Land. But unlike Doflamingo, she was accepted. So Doflamingo lost out and Gunko succeeded. I could see them being parallels in that way. So in this way, she is exactly what Brook probably thinks of her, unlike how the people of Elbaf perceive Loki. Or if she's being set up to be redeemed, which would be very strange, but it's a possibility, I could potentially see that perhaps her father was corrupt, and it is Brook who doesn't understand the full length of what he was going to do. So Gunko sacrificed herself and became a holy knight as to spare the rest of the family. Maybe that's a case as well. I'm not sure, but I think it's one of those two. Either she's evil or she's sacrificial. That's what I think. But moving on, with Brook calling out to Gunko, this breaks Emu's control over Gunko. Gunko releases Brook from the bindings. This then affects all the other bindings on the island, including the ones that are guiding the children. But when Emu assumes control, Brook is ensnared in the wrappings, and Brook is then attacked by Emu Gunko, of which he blocks with his shield. I didn't know he had a shield on him. That's insane. But this is what I'm talking about when you look at characters who have had build-up and the build-up is paying off. I gotta say, you don't see this with Jinbei. It just doesn't happen. Any narrative payoff is going to happen with the island itself as opposed to Jinbei as a character, and I have always just found that odd, because here we are finding out more lore through some of the tidbits that were presented in Thor Bark over a decade ago. It's crazy, and it's so rewarding to be someone who maybe has been reading this far for a decade or more, or someone who's just caught up, and you see these seeds coming to harvest now as ripe fruit in the narrative. It's immaculate storytelling. I love it so much. But unfortunately, when it comes to Jinbei, who, by the way, has been freed along with the rest of the people who were tied up by Gunko, I don't see this same thing happening, because the only lore bits that we have are concerning Shirahoshi and then Fishman Island as a whole. So I'm really waiting to see where he goes, because I'm not seeing him going anywhere. But also, going back to the whole separation arc that happened in Sabaody Archipelago, it's very funny too that Brook is now involved directly with Emu, because Brook once upon a time was kind of a stand-in for Emu, as those occultists thought they summoned him and called him Satan back in the day. So it all comes full circle now, which is funny because a magic circle, a pentagram, was involved with both characters, but I digress. The point is that this has been set up for years and the payoff is happening, and I am simply elated. And it's crazy that he has the fortitude to block a possessed Holy Knight. I love Brook. I simply love Brook. I've loved him since, 2008? I loved him. He's a great character. Simply immaculate. Okay, so Robin is still tied up because, of course, her bindings were caused by Shepard Sommers. And Shepard Sommers is leading the troops, which means the Elbathian children, on his weird thorn snake, as he is taunting the son of Scopper Gaban, because of course he hates Scopper Gaban. And the getaway ship is very close as they're proceeding towards it. However, that's when Ripley and Oimo come on the scene. But then they are confronted with the nightmare creature of Nika, of which they attack. However, this then leads to a sick triple attack from Gerd, Goldberg, and the latecomer Road, as they use their combined might to make an attack called Three Generals Gokuko Sovereignty, which is similar to the attack that Brock and Dory use. So this is pretty sick, and that downs the nightmare version of Nika, of whom falls into the getaway ship that the Holy Knights were preparing to board the giant children on. And Somers is mortified because the game is not fun anymore, and they lost. They absolutely lost, because that was their only way to get the children off the island. So the Holy Knights have lost in this moment. That's funny. That's great. Oh man, I love it. Absolutely love it. So with that being said, no break next week. And if you are enjoying the video, hit that like button. And if you're enjoying the content so far, hit the subscription button, because I make content every day on One Piece. And to make sure you never miss any of that content, hit that bell. Also, if you could, hit the hype button, because it supposedly helps. But with that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Rex.